Hello and welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and today we're going to be talking with two members of a group dedicated to exposing Catholic priest abuse of children.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at FFRF.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Today, Freethought Matters is going to look at the decades-long crimes against children and its cover-up by the Catholic Church. The Freedom from Religion Foundation has been monitoring this issue. FFRF published the first book calling attention to clergy abuse of children in 1988 and runs a monthly black-collar crime blotter in our newspaper, Freethought Today. My guests today are dedicating their lives to helping survivors get justice. They are Peter Isely, a nationally known advocate against priest abuse and a survivor of childhood sexual assault by a Wisconsin priest. He's a founding member of SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, a graduate of Harvard Divinity School and a psychotherapist in private practice. Peter has established and directed the nation's only inpatient program for victims of clergy sexual trauma at Rogers Memorial Hospital located outside of Milwaukee. Also joining me is Sarah Pearson, Deputy Director of Nate's Mission. Sarah is likewise a survivor of abuse and a recent grad of Harvard Divinity School. Sarah Pearson is the director of the film we'll be previewing called Manufacturing the Clerical Predator. Thank you so much, Peter and Sarah, for driving here from Milwaukee to be in our studio live today.
Thank you for having us.
It's such an honor to finally meet you. And Peter, I've been reading about you for 34 years. High time we finally met.
Yeah.
And you are a co-founder of SNAP, and I wonder if you could tell us something about your experience. You were a survivor of abuse. How did you become this advocate that you are?
Well, you know, people say, how did this work start? And it's like every day or every month or every year, I'm like, well, it's done, and it's just never done. That's how certain vocations in life happen. But I was sexually assaulted and abused at a boarding school. It was a minor seminary. I was 13 when it started. The priest was the dean of students, and he was appointed my spiritual director, because every student had to have a spiritual director. This is a very, very common story. And then he became a rector. He became the head of the school. There's probably 50 Franciscan Capuchin monks. Now, this is actually a liberal religious order, which is very important that we talk about that. That liberal-conservative divide that everything gets put into is totally irrelevant with this issue. Conservative bishops and cardinals have covered this up. Liberal bishops and cardinals have covered it up. There's something underneath this which is much deeper than that sort of division that they also like to put things in. But I was assaulted again at this school, and it went on and off for several years. Some of it was quite horrendous. It was horrible. But my classmates were there. Now, if you imagine, we're living there too with dorms, bunks, things like that. A lot of these minor seminaries are still, around the world are still there. There are very few left in the United States, but that seminary is still running. It's still operating.
That has to really eat at you, huh?
It does. I mean, when I was there had to have been. Now I know because we've gotten the files. From abusers, including the man who assaulted me. Court ordered, those files released, and I mean, I knew it at the time, but there were probably 5 or 6. Like career pedophiles.
At this boarding school?
At the seminary, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, career. And every year a new crop of kids would come in, and you were left there. The worst thing was when, my mom would drive, on a Christmas break, and my mom would drive us back, to the school, and it's out in the country, it's like in the middle of nowhere, and you make this turn, it's off on 23 and Highway W, it's, and if you know the Wisconsin region up there. But, okay, so you make this turn, and you see this, because it's on a big hill, it's a beautiful campus, but built in like 1840s, started, whatever, so you see this hill, and you can see it from a distance. Right, and your heart, your stomach, and you can't say anything. You're being returned, you're being brought back. And so you'd see, and then it dipped. The hill would dip, right, and then and then you'd come up closer, and then there it was. And
so did the abuser ever? Were you ever able to eventually sue or get any kind of acknowledgement or justice in this?
I can actually confront him. I went to divinity school and at Harvard, and things were getting better, and that's when my recovery was starting. And then when I came back, I was in my late 20s. Now I know how rare it was for somebody to come forward the way I did at that age. The average age for clergy abuse victims around the world to come forward is, believe it or not, 51.
Wow.
So it was unusual what I did, but yeah, I did confront him in the provincial. Of course, I was lied to about it. I was very concerned about him being around children still. They had taken him out of the seminary and put him in another one in Milwaukee, and he was at a parish. He was working at a parish, taking kids camping. This was like the typical kind of story. I found out from his files when he was sued. He was brought to civil court. The criminal statute was very bad at the time. It was like 6 years or some nonsense like that. So if you're 5 years old, you have to report by the time you're 11, kind of nonsense. And it's the most underreported crime in the United States, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. It's like 7 or 8%. But like I said, I confronted him, and I've personally talked to, I think, 48 victims of him. They absolutely knew about him years before he ever got to me, and he continued to abuse after he got to me. That's what brought victims, survivors around the world, around the country at least at first. We knew that this was never going to change. This was never going to stop unless we stopped it. We didn't know how we were going to stop it, but we knew that no one else was going to. And so this was happening simultaneously around all these cities and places around the country. And then we found each other and came together. We saw people on TV shows like you, and it was amazing. The power that survivors have when they come together. And this is a tough issue. There's a lot to be done, but there has been titanic change because of this issue. You go around the world, because I go around the world with this. I mean, everywhere in the world, pedophile priests. They have made this their, maybe it's the alliteration, but they have made this their brand in a way. And I think, we'll talk about this if we can a little bit, but it is something, they say it's not about the Catholic Church, but there's something about the Catholic Church that makes this worse. There is something unique about the Catholic Church, and the evidence and the statistics of abuse and rates of abuse and historical transmission of abuse shows that. And this isn't just about, some priests are pedophiles and they just happen to be priests. They're pedophiles that just happen to be priests. That's not the pattern that we see. We see that the system in a way creates sexual abusers. That's the thing that is the most worrisome and terrifying for the hierarchy and the Vatican and the Pope, that gets explored. What is it about your system that is creating individuals that might come in not having that proclivity, and then over several years, they almost like cave into this system and they start abusing. In the statistics in the United States, they start in their middle age. That's not like any other set of pedophiles I've ever known.
Yeah, usually start young.
Exactly. So what's happening by the induction into this system and the exercise of power and how it's done that is creating and recreating this space in which these individuals are doing this, and how is that related to the normal functioning of the church? Because this has always been part of its normal functioning. That this has always been going on. They've always known about this. They've always had to deal with this. This is not something that just happened. And so, to become a bishop, you had to be proven to be loyal to be able to deal with this. So it's this thing that's part of their everyday functioning, but it's the underside, it's the dark side, it's the obscene underside of this institution, and that's what we were dropped into as children. We were dragged down, pulled down, pushed into this darkness, into this underground of theirs. Well, everybody else was, fine, and so our witness and testimony from that place is to, of course, that this can't happen again to another child. This, I know every survivor, that you want to be the last one. This cannot go on. This cannot happen to children anymore.
Well, thank you for everything you've done in speaking out and educating and agitating. And now I want to bring Sarah Pearson into this. And Sarah, I know that you've had a background that involved abuse, not in the Catholic Church, that has given you special insight. And you're now with a group called Nate's Mission. Briefly, what does Nate's Mission do?
Well, we're named for a survivor of clergy sexual abuse. His name was Nate Lindstrom, and actually he died 3 years ago yesterday by suicide because of the way that because of what he experienced as a child and because of the way he was treated by the church and their attorneys when he eventually reported that abuse and aimed to intervene to stop it and to get some form of reparation for himself. And that we named our group after him. We were in close touch with his family, and Peter was a good friend of his. And he said his wish was that what happened to him would never happen again. So that's why we launched this group about 2 years ago.
And you've launched a video, and we do have an excerpt of it that shows Nate, talks a little bit about him. So let's look at that.
Okay.
On March 5th of 2020, we met with Attorney General Call and District Attorney John Chisholm to discuss the possibility of a statewide investigation. Call told us he needed a political reason to investigate the church. Just 4 days later, Nate Lindstrom died by suicide. As a teenager, Nate was sexually assaulted by Norbertine priests at Notre Dame Academy in De Pere, Wisconsin.
As a youth, you think that they would do something at some point, that they would help, but they never did. They were only interested in attacking us.
Because there were no available avenues to justice through the court system, Nate was forced to seek help from the Norbertines, the organization whose priests and administrators groomed him, abused him, and intimidated him into silence. After the church cut off payments for Nate's mental health treatment, he took his life.
It's up to us to carry on Nate's mission. Don't let it happen to your kid, your brother, or the neighbor kid.
His death galvanized alumni of Notre Dame Academy to demand transparency and accountability from the church and intervention from the Wisconsin Department of Justice. When Call's office finally agreed to open an investigation, we were cautiously optimistic.
And I'll use this word very deliberately, we want your blessing.
We were clear that the investigation needed to focus on the church as a nonprofit corporation and examine patterns and practices that facilitated sexual abuse.
We can't just prosecute a few individuals and believe that this problem is going to go away.
We brought them our expertise on the history of this issue, everything we had learned through our network of survivors throughout the country, and most importantly, our commitment to justice and truth-telling, a commitment that we wanted to believe the Wisconsin Department of Justice shared.
So we're going to take a break in a minute, but briefly, both of you are in Wisconsin. There's a problem here. Do you want to summarize that, Sarah?
Absolutely. I mean, what has happened is since the revelations of this widespread abuse have come to light and have been reported on by the media, the church has actually cracked down and legally made things worse for survivors since these things came to light. There's a number of decisions that have basically insulated the church from civil claims, from having to pay survivors for the things that their employees did to them. And that's really caused a problem, and that's something that we've been working on and that we want the Attorney General to incorporate into this investigation that he's recently opened. It's very widespread here. Some of the rates here are as high as anywhere else in the country of cover-up of abuse. And because of the legal structure of this state and the interventions on the part of the church and their lobbying arm, they've really been able to control the aftermath of this and prevent or to keep survivors from speaking out, to intimidate them, and to prevent lawsuits from coming forward. And that's something that Nate's mission is dedicated to fighting against.
And you have done a video that, a documentary film that is just debuting called Manufacturing the Clerical, what is this?
Manufacturing the Clerical Predator.
Manufacturing the Clerical Predator. And when we come back from this break, we're going to see a preview of it and talk more about that.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace.
Let's restore respect for America's secular roots. Help the Freedom from Religion Foundation defend the wall of separation between state and church. Join us at FFRF.org. Freedom depends on freethinkers.
Welcome back to Freethought Matters. I'm speaking with Peter Isely, a nationally known advocate of those abused by Catholic priests, and with Sarah Pearson, who's made a film called Manufacturing the Clerical Predator. So let's play a short teaser about this film.
I think when you join the seminary, you're being inducted into something unique and special. I'm engaging and giving my life for this sort of noble, heroic cause. It only feeds into that narrative to be told that the church is under attack and you need to defend it.
There's a mindset that they do not have to play by the same rules as the people beneath them. It's hard for people to hear that because these are supposed to be your spiritual men, your spiritual leaders. But I've been a part of that culture, and it's weird when you're in it.
We had to deal with this massive cover-up. The Catholic Council of Bishops did not want to do the right thing. They thought that because they were bishops, that their power and prestige alone would be able to control the issue.
They feel higher, better, more entitled, special.
Abuse in the Catholic Church is a coordinated, planned out project. It's a network of people. There are predators who talk to each other. There are bishops who cover up for predators. There are bishops who are predators themselves who are covering up for other predators. And the church has yet to come forward and own up to the fact that there is something about the way their institution operates that makes pedophiles, that grooms people to become pedophiles.
If you look at the message of Jesus, it was about humbling oneself, more or less. But this is the opposite of that. And to think that they don't have to play by the same rules as you folks, sort of beneath us do. It's not a good thing.
That is an unwritten code that's there, is very powerful. You never rat out another priest, never turn him in. We used to see ourselves as bonded together because of this mystical concept of who we were. We were priests, and we could do what no other human being can do. We can turn a loaf of bread and a glass of wine into the body and blood of Jesus Christ. We can absolve people from their sins and get them off the hook from life in hell. This kind of power. And we didn't want to give that up.
Well, it looks wonderful. I think Thomas Doyle is such a hero. So glad that you got him on in the documentary. But what's the main theme of this documentary?
Well, it's really a theoretical intervention into this issue, that's been explored for so long and reported on so much. Peter and I field a lot of questions from people, and I think the most common are like, why is it that this is so prevalent in the Catholic Church? How long has this been going on? Like, is it still going on? Like, these types of questions, like, what is it in particular about this organization that causes that? So I'd really set out to sort of answer those questions in this film and address, those issues that are continually coming up. And Peter had touched on this before, talking about the statistic that actually comes from the church themselves, that the majority of offenders start mid-career, which is really very different from other statistics about pedophiles or people who abuse children in that way in general. So we sort of, went through this history. You mentioned Thomas Doyle. He's a wonderful person, a medieval historian, and he's written a lot about how there are documents and evidence that point to these kinds of crimes all the way back to the 4th century. They've been recorded essentially throughout all of the Catholic Church's history on nearly every continent in which they've been in operation, and they're still going on. So what we were looking at is how particularly the structure of the Catholic Church, and I guess their character, their personhood as an organization, as a nonprofit corporation, and also as a monarchy, to be frank, has, enabled this kind of crime, this kind of intergenerational transmission of this crime. And
this kind of cover-up.
Yes, and this kind of cover-up. And basically how, as an organization, that this is part of the personhood and character of this organization. This is their most obscene secret. It's something that they've gone to such great lengths to protect and to facilitate and enable through the years. And we're just trying to sort of break this down and look into, how does that kind of culture develop? And we specifically interviewed 3 former priests and seminarians from the Wisconsin area to ask them, about their own experience with this kind of culture. One is a survivor of clerical abuse and was a former priest. Another, a seminarian who witnessed these kinds of behaviors in his own experience at the seminary. And one, Thomas Doyle, who's a pretty prolific church historian and whistleblower. And what we heard from them was just really evidence of, this isn't a thing of the past. It's not like this culture has gone away and that it's been corrected by all of this public exposure and some of these lawsuits against the church, that the way that this organization continues to operate and continues to train even new seminarians who are joining is to continue fostering this kind of behavior, this kind of culture that allows this abuse to happen. So that's what we're exploring in the film, and we hope that that theoretical intervention will help and will be a great tool for people who watch this so that we can form better tactics, better strategies to combat it in the Catholic Church and prevent future abuse.
So many victims, Peter, now and over time, and I know you're, as a person living in Wisconsin, so concerned about what isn't being done correctly here to rein in the church. Briefly, what would you like to see of the government?
Sure. I just wanted to quickly, on Sarah's point, there's one question that I always ask a bishop and a cardinal when I meet them, because it gets to this point. You can't be a woman and a priest, fine, I'll accept that for a moment. You can't be a married man and a priest. But under church law, literally under church law around the world, you can be a child molester and a priest. Yes. Explain that to me. I had a philosopher when I was in graduate school, Nelson Goodman, and he would say, take a sentence and then make a world in which that sentence is true. So take the sentence I just gave you and make a world in which that sentence is true, and that's the Catholic priesthood. And I don't like saying that, but that's what it is. And they have used an enormous amount of money, big surprise, power and influence. In Wisconsin, the situation for survivors, because of the reaction to our success and what we've done, they're 3 doors down in Madison, at the State House. It's worse than what it was when we came forward. There's a First Amendment decision here. You cannot sue a church organization for an abusive cleric, for covering it up, supervisor, put them in your parish, because of the First Amendment, because it entangles the courts in the exercise of religion.
Which is absurd.
It is beyond absurd. Yeah. And then they had to do another decision after that, which I can't go into. One was written by a liberal, Judge Geske, Janine Geske at Marquette. She's at Marquette. But it was like, no. But it was like, you can't sue your offender if they're not a family member. Basically, you don't have this Wisconsin delayed clause that you can use. What I'm saying is that they went to work to make sure that as this was being exposed and they were having another bad news day, that they know what they're doing. And right now, the Republican, the bishops of Wisconsin are a wing of the Republican Party. That's what they are. And this thing about politics, are you kidding me? They're a political entity. That's what they do. And they're very, very good at it. And they get this exemption or you can't, that's people's faith, that's people's religion. It's terrible. I mean, they don't have to report abuse in this state. They were able to manage that. If you're a priest and you find out abuse, you don't have, a child's getting abused, you're not required like 30 other professions to report it. Why is that? The exemption, once again.
Because dogma is more important than people, and
Obviously.
That's wrong. So Sarah, how can other people see the documentary?
Well, it's going to be publicly available online in the next few weeks, so I would encourage your viewers and listeners to go to www.natesmission.org. There will be information about the film there, and then links to some of the other projects we've done so they can learn more about our ongoing work in Wisconsin.
And can they donate?
Absolutely, they can do that there too, and every donation helps us with our grassroots work on behalf of survivors.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Peter and Sarah, for the work you're doing and for coming here today to be on Freethought Matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters, because Freethought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.